Hi, welcome to our program. I'm Kevin Keeler, chair of HCTV Television, and I have the honor today to have the new city manager, Ana Cortez. Welcome to the program, Ana.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me here.
You're very welcome. We've been having a discussion about the future of Helena, and what a way to bring in a new city manager to talk about that discussion of Helena's future. Ana recently joined the city administration as a city manager in January of this year, so she's had 4 months under her belt. How is that working out for you?
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
The snow keeps coming down, but it's been wonderful. Lots of new faces, a lot of new issues, and a lot of the same issues, regardless of the city. It seems like some issues just don't go away.
Sure.
It's been fun getting to know members of the community, being able to go to people's homes and having conversations about the things that are important to them, showing up to civic engagements and have people be very open about what works, what doesn't, ideas. What I have found is that Helena is full of folks who want to be part of the solution. And so they're willing to not only share the problem, but also give you ideas on, have you thought about this? Why don't we do it this way? And so it is truly, has been a wonderful few months.
Sure.
Of lots of snow.
Lots of snow. Well, that's wintertime for us, Helena is a small community compared to, well, even in Montana, we're probably the smallest market for the state, but we are small in comparison to other cities throughout the country. Municipalities are an important thing on a local level. I want to touch about that a little bit to see what your philosophy is on the municipality, presentation of who we are as a community.
Well, I think it's important for communities to have a brand. I do find that too many times communities don't spend enough time developing their own identity. And not that it has to come from government. Frankly, I think it's better when it doesn't. But certainly I do think that the government has a role in better defining the identity of of the city. I think that for Helena, we are the seat of government as well for the state. And so we have this almost dual dynamic. We are a local government, we're a city, but we're also the capital of the state of Montana. Right. And so I tell you, I see that we are located close to other counties as well. We have Jefferson County right around the corner, if you think about it, depending on where you are. So we're Lewis and Clark, but we have Jefferson right there. And so to some degree, I do think that it is important for communities to define themselves in some way. Sure. I think for us, our mountains, our hills are wonderful, and they're just very unique icons of what the community is. And those are, part of our treasure. Sure.
Helena was never a master plan. We started out as a gold camp, and you can see the downtown and how that worked out, but we have a rich history, over 150 years here. We're probably the only camp to have survived. Butte might make an argument, but Helena definitely was, its origins were the gold miner, the frontier, and here we are, a battle for the state capital. Most citizens know that history, but how do we move forward, with such complexities as you talk about? We've got a neighbor to the south, Jefferson County. We got a lot of residents who live there but commute to Helena. We're the state capital, so that brings both, people who have talents that the city can use and ideas and imagination that other cities really can't draw from.
I think our downtown is, if you're going to think about branding, and if you're going to think about icons, so when you see the Golden Gate Bridge, you're never confused about where that is.
Correct.
When you see the Eiffel Tower, you're never confused about where that is. And so for Helena, what I would say is, if you look at our walking mall, if you look at our pedestrian areas, if you look at our downtown, put the state capitol aside, because state capitals look the same if you really think about it. There are some that are unique.
Well, there's 50 of them.
Yeah, but I can't say that I know that a person would stand in front of the Capitol and say, "Oh, this is Helena, Montana," different from some other capital. But if you look at our downtown, when you see our art, where you see our buildings, where you see the hills behind it, the backdrop, where you see the cathedral, you're not confused.
That's true.
You are in Helena, Montana.
That's true.
And so that is where our branding is at, in these very unique, show me a cathedral like that anywhere in the United States, especially if you're looking at it from, I guess, the east side, right, from the east going west, so you see the mountain in the back.
Yes, it's a proximity.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Unique.
A cherish, yeah.
Unique.
Yeah.
The structure may be similar. You know, we can talk about a couple of the other cathedrals in the United States that are just as beautiful, but nobody has that backdrop.
No.
That is very unique to Helena.
That's true. Now you're bringing in the rich culture of the city, and you know that it was built on gold, and
Yes.
you know that was built from gold.
Yes, it
Now
was.
that's gone. Now we're a government-centered municipality. But it's interesting that you bring up a walking mall, and I say that because you have fresh eyes on a new idea, and you see the uniqueness of that downtown area. People who have lived in Helena saw the destruction of urban renewal, so when they see the mall, they see that walking mall, they think of urban renewal. They think of how we had to go in and, you know, change for the good, better, or worse downtown. And you bring in a fresh look to that. That's an interesting way to see things, especially moving forward. What, you know, we want to explain a little bit why you see that attraction to the downtown so much.
Yes, and I will tell you that I've been in conversations where folks talk about the fact that it's so much easier to shop in the valley. It's so much easier to go to Target, park, you don't have to pay, you walk, and there you can go to Target. That experience you can have anywhere in the United States. Parking in front of Target and walking to Target, you can do that in any state. But parking in our downtown, getting out of your car, going to the very unique set of shops that we have downtown, having the experience of walking through these beautiful art pieces that are unique to the city of Helena, while also seeing the nature that's around it. Now, that's a unique experience. You're not going to get that anywhere else. When I came to the recruitment process, to the interviews, one of my biggest surprises was how wonderful it was to walk downtown. In the city of Yakima, we were struggling with that. We were struggling with the fact that we didn't have a downtown destination, and that since 2013, we have been trying to get that right. That we had found investors, private investors, who were willing to put in over $9 million of private money for the downtown, and we still couldn't get it done. Here we have it. So when my first walk outside of the hotel, I realized, oh my gosh, there's a destination. And
There's a branding.
there's branding already in place. I don't have to worry about it. It's already in place. There is a destination. We don't have to create it. It's already in place. What I have come to appreciate now, living here, is that folks are not necessarily recognizing the value of that unique experience.
Interesting, you know, because, you know, we take all those ideas, but yet we have to turn a profit.
Of course.
We have to make somehow that unique situation, you know, create commerce. And that has been part of the dilemma with that downtown area for whatever reason. Because I tend to agree with you. I think it's unique and it's worth branding. And it gives people space.
Yes.
You know, that's great. Well, I want to kind of get back into how is it that you arrived from El Salvador to Helena, Montana?
So the road has been long, and let's see, it's not that complicated really. So my family, like a bunch of Salvadorians, so you know, I used to know these numbers by heart. I don't anymore, but there are millions of us in throughout the world. But in the United States, California was one of the destinations.
And why the destination?
Frankly, I think it was by family ties more than anything else. In the early 80s, it was basically New York, Washington, D.C., Houston, in Texas, Houston, and then in California, mostly Los Angeles. So actually San Francisco wasn't even it. My father's family had migrated to the United States in the early 50s, and they had settled in San Francisco. So the reality is that for my family, coming to San Francisco wasn't a stretch. My dad was the only one of his family who wasn't in San Francisco.
Oh.
So when the war became more serious, I guess would be one way of putting it, and my parents made the decision that it was time to leave, coming to San Francisco was the logical place. And so we came. He reunited with his family, and we got to meet most of the family, and we settled. And we settled in San Francisco. Went to high school in San Francisco, and the logical place to go to school would be Berkeley because it's right there. And so went to Berkeley, and so after 4 years, I was given the opportunity to attend the University of Washington as part of the Alfred P. Sloan Fellowship. And so I accepted and went to the University of Washington. So I spent another 2.5 years in Seattle. And then I went back to California to get married. And my husband and I made a living there. And the children were born, grew up, graduated from high school, started college, and my husband retired. So when he retired, I asked, okay, now that you're retired, let's move. Neither my husband nor I had ever really found California to be home. I don't think neither one of us could really articulate why. To me, Washington always felt like home. When I was applying for the position in Yakima, someone actually asked me, why? Why are you leaving California? Why do you want to come to Washington? And no one had ever asked me that question. And so I kind of gave it a little thought, and I said, well, California was never my choice. My parents didn't ask me, would you like to move to San Francisco? They never asked that question. Washington was my choice. I wanted to go to the University of Washington. I wanted to live in Seattle. I wanted to be part of the Northwest community. And then my husband found that it was better for us to live in California, so we went to California. And then in California, it made sense for the children to grow up and be stable and all that good stuff. But once they left the house, then at that point, my husband and I started thinking about going to Spokane, actually. That was the idea. In 2016, we came to Glacier Park. And we had landed in Spokane. We're walking, just having a good time. And I tell him, I said, I'm ready to leave California. You just retired. I think Spokane would be a great destination. And so he said, sure. So then we went to Glacier Park, and he said, well, have you thought about moving to Montana? And I'm like, I can't imagine finding a job in Montana.
Why would he say Montana?
He's from Montana. So the man wants to come home, okay? So
he's from
Miles City, Montana.
Miles City.
And so his 2 cents is, we've done what we needed to do in California. Why don't we move to Montana? And then I said, well, no, why don't we move to Washington? So that was that. We went back home, and then he started showing me pictures of a beautiful city. And I even said to him, is that Austria? He says, no, Ana, it's Helena, Montana.
Yeah, is that Austria? That's funny. You must have seen a picture of the cathedral.
Yes, with the mountains in the back.
Yeah,
it had to be Austria, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so I was so surprised on how lovely and beautiful it was.
Yes.
So then that was the seed that was planted, that maybe Montana would be a good place for us to go.
Wow.
So later that year, I decided that yes, it was time to go. And so I actually thought we would stay in California. Funny enough, I wasn't comfortable quite yet leaving the state. And but the opportunity came up to go to Yakima, Washington as an assistant city manager. And so that was an opportunity that I had been seeking in California for about 15 years, never being able to go through the door. And somebody opened the door for me in Yakima, and I said yes. And so the job was offered at 4:30 on a Friday. I accepted the job at 4:45 that same Friday. And we were packing, and we haven't looked back.
Great.
So while we were in Washington, my husband keeps asking, what about Montana? What about Montana? And so he was the one who actually told me that the city manager position was open.
It was coming open.
And so then at that point I said, well, it's a good opportunity. Let's do it. So I want to finish my career in municipal government as a city manager. I was assistant in Yakima. I would lie if I said that I don't miss Washington. Washington still feels like home. My husband is very happy here. I'm city manager here. This is Austria, so I'm very happy.
Yeah, Austria, Montana. Well, what are the similarities, say, between Yakima and any other municipality that you've worked at and Helena?
That is to me, it always blows my mind. It doesn't matter if the city is San Francisco or if the city is Helena. Some issues are just the same.
Yeah.
Trip hazards on the sidewalks. Whose responsibility is it? I don't care which city you're in the United States. That's just bread and butter. That's one of those things you're always going to address. The potholes on the streets. Oh, you never have enough funds for that, no matter where you are. Transit, how to make transit more effective. Whether it's San Francisco or whether it's Helena, still a conversation. Housing. Housing, since I started working, so for 30 years, housing has been a problem. There are some communities that have never been affordable, and it's foolish to think that they'll ever be. San Francisco being one of those cases. But we're also seeing transformation in some communities that should be affordable. Like you see the math and you're like, how is this possible? And I would put Helena in that category. Why would you think that you can get $100,000 for that house? But people are getting $100,000 for the house. Who lives in them? I have no idea. The issues of taxation. Too many taxes, too few taxes. I don't care which city you're in, that's always a conversation. Police and fire, can we afford them? That's always a conversation. Police and fire, we never have enough police people and fire people. That's always a conversation. Code enforcement, too many carrots, too many sticks. That's always a conversation. So, and the list goes on. It's amazing to me how it doesn't matter what size of the city, doesn't matter what state it is, conservative, liberal, desert, mountain, ocean, it's the same conversation.
Yeah, so the idea here is leadership to get over those hurdles. You know,
Yes.
they're all the same.
Yes.
You know, nobody likes paying taxes. Nobody likes potholes. Nobody likes a street light that's not there when they're walking down a road without a sidewalk. But we have to pay for those things. So, you know, it's always in the mesh there, isn't it? You know, we want this, but how do we afford to do this, you know? And Helena being a government town, we have some drawbacks there. Not everything is taxed equally in the city as compared to, say, Missoula or Bozeman. We have some, I don't know, special tax zones that aren't taxed, you know, according to property. So, you know, that puts more of a burden on citizens and businesses in which to work. And I don't know, Helena has been said that, you know, we're growing, and we'll see how that comes along. We have pains with that, you know, and that's interesting. Now, you've talked about this mountain setting, and, you know, in our conversations before, no doubt about it, you came to this city and you saw its beauty, you saw its history, you saw its mall, and then you settled in. And now that you're taking a deep breath, I guess the next question is, what concerns you? What is it, you know, you see from your experiences? What concerns you?
So coming into the job, there were certain issues that I figured would take energy.
For example?
For example, our financial condition.
Our budgets.
So, correct. Our budget, and to be specific, our general fund.
Okay.
So part of the recruitment process was to evaluate the budget. And again, specifically the general fund, which I did. So I knew that we had challenges. Just last week, we met with the commissioners to present $1.4 million in cuts, because that's what we need to do in order to balance our budget.
So we have a deficit.
We had a deficit.
We had, okay.
We had a deficit.
Okay.
We presented to them
Okay.
that level of savings / cuts so that we could balance. And so in doing that, we had to postpone a number of activities. Our main goal was not to affect a level of service. So in the cuts that we presented, we focused, for example, on positions that were vacant.
Okay.
A position that is vacant and it's eliminated clearly doesn't have an impact on level of service because there was nobody providing the service.
So,
we looked.
So what, you know, I mean, that's just like every municipality, but what keeps you up at night?
So that would have been keeping me up at night. And again, coming into the job. So there's the what you perceive as being the challenge, and then when you arrive to a place what you know is the challenge.
Right.
So in my opinion, at that point, my number one priority was really the budget, to get my hands around that budget, because we had money, it's just that we didn't have money for everything. Once I arrived, I found an unexpected piece of information, I guess would be one way of putting it. And the irony was that the reason why I found the city so appealing were those beautiful hills, you know, that wildlife that is right next door, is you know, those trees, the trails, the animals that you see. I mean, you see deer all over the places, etc. It was beautiful. It was a storybook. Not once thinking, that's fuel for a fire. I didn't really have that appreciation. Most of my career has been in metropolitan centers. Even Yakima, even though really it is a rural community, but it is 100,000. So it has that suburban feel to it, even though it's very agriculture. So here, this is truly my first time in a natural setting. And I had not thought about the importance of fire mitigation, of emergency preparedness, of evacuation and education, and emergency response. In my experience, that had always come attached to an earthquake. Sure. Being in the Bay Area, that's what was logical. You worry about earthquakes. You don't worry about fires. Even though I actually had gone through the Berkeley-Oakland Hills fire.
Sure.
But that would seem like such an aberration. But as you know, Paradise just happened.
Paradise,
less than
California.
6 months ago.
Yeah.
Less than six months ago, a community of 32,000 people disappeared from the face of the earth. It no longer exists in the state of California. And it was a thriving community with people from all over the places and so on and so forth.
And they never thought it was going to happen to them.
Nobody ever thinks these things are going to happen.
Right.
The year before it was Santa Rosa.
Yeah.
And the list goes on. So we have learned that fires are now part of the normal.
Right.
They are not the exception. They are no longer the Berkeley Hill fires that will happen once every 50 years. Now we're seeing every year. And here I am in a setting very similar to Paradise. And so as I start meeting with constituent groups, as I start meeting with advocacy groups, with interest groups, with individuals who work in the sector, I began to feel that there was a disconnect because when I was asking questions, I wasn't necessarily getting consistent answers.
To the fire mitigation and
correct.
A plan.
Who is in charge? How do we leave? How do we know how to leave? Where are the evacuation routes? How do people know what the evacuation routes are? Where are the shelters? What happens if those shelters don't work? What happens if the wind changes direction? And so on and so forth. Because the real crises have happened when people didn't expect the wind to go in that direction.
Right.
Berkeley and Oakland burned because the wind wasn't supposed to go in that direction. Paradise burned because the wind wasn't supposed to go in that direction and the evacuation routes were questionable. Santa Rosa, same thing. So the real tragedies happen when the unthinkable happens.
And we have to be ready for the unthinkable.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
So the reason...
So this is what keeps you up.
This
This brand new, beautiful landscape in the back has turned into
a liability.
A dilemma.
It's a liability.
Oh,
and
Ana,
the difference is that for the first time in my professional life, now I am city manager. It is my responsibility. The property and the lives in this community are my responsibility. I cannot assume somebody else is going to worry about it. The buck stops with me. And so regardless of who's taking the lead, I need to make sure that the city knows that the city is ready, that the city is completely aware of what it needs to do.
The city has a plan.
Yes. And until I feel comfortable, I think that that's what's keeping me up at night. Ironically, the budget deficit, I'm not going to say that it's solved because the numbers are not final, but I'm not losing sleep over that one anymore. I would say that quickly I actually stopped losing sleep over that one, thinking about the fires instead.
Yeah, it's permanent. Well, what a great conversation. We're going to have to do this more, obviously, because there's a lot to talk about. And you're a fun guest. So thank you so much for showing up here at HCTV Studios. And we'll be talking to the community again. Thank you much.
Thank you very much for having me here.
You're welcome.